वो जब दिन को रात कहें तो तुरंत मान जाओ, नहीं मानोगे तो वो दिन में नकाब ओढ़ लेंगे। उनको ये इंतजार था कि ये कोरोना वायरस मोदी की छवि को चपेट में ले लेगा। ऐसा लगता है कि आपने मन बना लिया है कि 100 साल तक सत्ता में नहीं आना है।
अरे आपके काम की बात है, मजा लो ना।
पंडित नेहरू देश के पहले प्रधानमंत्री लाल किले से बोल रहे हैं, अगर कि ये डिस्टर्ब तब करते हैं कि उनको अंदाज आता है चोट बड़ी गहरी होने वाली है। कुछ लोग बोल करके भाग जाते हैं और जेलना ऐसे बेचारों को पड़ता है। मजा लीजिए आज।
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That was a glimpse of how the Prime Minister used sarcasm and satire to make his most scathing attack on the Congress party yet. In his 100-minute address in the Lok Sabha today, the Prime Minister attacked Congress right from Nehru to Rahul Gandhi. From inflation to COVID to mocking this government's attempts to make India self-reliant, Congress's arrogance and the inability of the party to course correct found mention in the Prime Minister's speech in Lok Sabha in his response to the President's speech earlier this year. He took the opportunity to remind the Congress of how it has been out of power for decades in multiple states across the country. Those who mocked India and its capabilities have today become a laughing stock, said the Prime Minister. He recalled how the Congress, instead of backing the government on handling of the pandemic, encouraged migrants to leave in hordes and carry the virus with them to far-flung states and villages. He slammed the principal opposition party for being a COVID super spreader. Listen in to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his address in Lok Sabha earlier today.
मुंबई के रेलवे स्टेशन पर खड़े रह करके मुंबई छोड़कर जाने के लिए प्रोत्साहित करने के लिए मुंबई में श्रमिकों को टिकट दिया गया, मुफ्त में टिकट दिया गया, लोगों को प्रेरित किया गया कि जाओ महाराष्ट्र में हमारे पर जो बोझ है वो जरा कम हो, और जाओ तुम उत्तर प्रदेश के हो, तुम बिहार के हो, जाओ वहां कोरोना फैलाओ। आपने ये बहुत बड़ा पाप किया।
The Prime Minister highlighted his government's achievements and slammed the Congress for misleading the country and the people of this country. He tagged them as the leader of the tukde gang. Quoting a Tamil poet, the Prime Minister reminded the Congress of what he called was a divide and rule policy. Once again, listen in to Prime Minister Modi.
कांग्रेस को हमेशा से इन बातों से नफरत रही है। विभाजनकारी मानसिकता उनके डीएनए में घुस गई है। अंग्रेज चले गए, लेकिन बांटो और राज करो, ये नीति कांग्रेस ने अपना चरित्र बना लिया है। और इसलिए ही आज कांग्रेस टुकड़े टुकड़े गैंग की लीडर बन गई है।
The opposition was quick to latch on to the comments made by the Prime Minister. Top leaders of all parties took to social media to show the mirror to the central government, especially over the handling of COVID-19. They spoke of deaths and job losses and hurt businesses due to the pandemic. But clearly, today belonged to Prime Minister. And even though the opposition was making all sides kinds of remarks at the Prime Minister's speech, the fact was that Rahul Gandhi had made his attack but wasn't in Parliament to listen in to the reply given by the Prime Minister. So that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the legitimate question on the Newshour tonight. Has the Prime Minister read the Congress's political epitaph That's the question and that's the debate. Modi all-out attack. That's the debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the News Hour at 9. Debate number 1 on Times Now. Super Prime Time.
And joining me tonight, Gaurav Bhatia, national spokesperson of the BJP, Ishkaran Bhandari, advocate of the Supreme Court, Abbas Haider, national spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, Mayur Shekhar Jha, political analyst, Dr. Suman C. Raman, political analyst. But my first question goes to Mr. Mohandas Pai, Arin Capital's chairman, and I want to ask you, Mohandas Pai. It's been quite a while, 7.5 years to be precise, that attacks have been made by the opposition on the Prime Minister. Well, that's fair. The opposition's right to ask questions in Parliament and seek answers cannot be questioned. But is it fair for those who raise questions not to be present when the answers are given? Is it fair for those who yesterday came out and said that, oh, people are buying bottled waters for 15 rupees and they're buying ice creams for 20 rupees. Why do they cry when wheat or rice prices go up by 1 rupee? Do you think the Prime Minister responded to all those critics who suddenly have woken up to price rise, to inflation, to COVID issues, to the fact that there is a virus which is the AA virus and all sorts of attacks on the government, just because they seem to be out of power and criticism comes easily to them?
Navika, what happened in Parliament in the earlier part before Prime Minister Modi is a sad explanation of why the opposition doesn't have its act together. First of all, you don't respect Parliament. You're not there when your questions are being answered, and you go away because you treat the country like a private jagir. You sit in the darbar in Delhi and think this country belongs to you. So you have a unique right to go talk what you want, then go away when people reply to you. That's not democracy. And then you make inane comments in Parliament without being really critical. They should have highlighted all the issues with proper data. Instead of that, you make some inane comments which confuse the people who are watching this. For example, you speak to any young person and they will tell you, we don't understand what these people stand for. We don't understand what are they talking. We don't understand what they're doing. All we hear is they got a one-point agenda, hate Modi, go on criticizing him without giving any substance to any of what they say or the data to say that. So I think you're very much right that they have been shown up for what they are. I wish they've been very constructive. They've given suggestions for the 75th year, say we should do this. They've spoken highly about India and not degraded India by saying, make in India mein nahi ho sakta hai. How can you make the statement? You're supposed to be India. You ruled this country for 55 years. You want this country to succeed. They don't want the country to succeed because they think if the country succeeds, Prime Minister Modi will succeed. So they want the country to fail. They're doing everything to make the country fail. And the young people of this country who are listening are aghast, are very angry and upset that these people are pulling the country down while they are working to build the country. Now, Navika, all of us on this debate, we have worked very hard to build our country. We want India to succeed. We have worked very hard to build India's brand. Do you think we'll be happy if somebody tries to pull India's brand down, either within the country or outside the country? We'll not be happy. Be critical, yes. Criticize for the good of the country. Tell us what has to be done, so more can be done. But pulling down India at every single instance, making you feel bad and inadequate, is what these people are at. I think Prime Minister Modi has thoroughly exposed them in his reply today.
Well, I want to ask the question to Mr. Mayur Shekhar Jha. And Mr. Mayur Shekhar Jha, the question is very simple. Please criticize the government. Please find answers to questions that this country wants. But then it has to be done in a manner that yields answers. And yields answers so that problems of the people of this country can be solved. Can you tonight deny any of the comments that have been made by the Prime Minister? Can you deny the fact that there was a change in the definition of the poverty line that was made in 2013? Can you deny the statements that the Prime Minister said and made about the former Finance Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram, in 2011 and 2012? Can you deny the fact that free tickets were given by political parties so that people, working in Maharashtra would go, there would be panic that would set in, and the COVID spread would go out of one state and go into the hinterland of this country? Do you think that was a time that the opposition should have actually thought about things, about how to control the pandemic rather than scoring political brownie points? And above all, where was Mr. Rahul Gandhi when the response was being given to the questions that he himself had raised?
Navika, your primary question here as to the role of the opposition vis-a-vis pandemic is what is fundamentally wrong in this whole discourse. You are blaming the opposition for a thing that you should be praising the opposition for. At a time when the government was needed the most, at a time when the government had turned a deaf ear and a blind eye to the ooze of millions and millions of daily wages across the country. It is a time when the Congress party, it is the time when the opposition rose up to the occasion and they stood by the daily wages. In the first wave, the Congress party stood with the daily wages. In the second wave, the Congress party stood with the struggling millions of people who are struggling to get hospital beds, etc. I don't expect you to praise the opposition, Navika. But the fundamental question that should be asked is that why should we expect, why is it that the opposition has to rise up for things that is primarily the responsibility of the government? On the question of migrant workers flying from Bombay and other parts of the country, Navika, let me bring you a case in point. I come from Jharkhand. Which sends maximum number of daily wages and migrant workers to this country. And प्रधानमंत्री जी का एक बहुत famous बयान था कि मैं चाहता हूं कि हवाई चप्पल के लोग हवाई जहाज की यात्रा करें. And on your show, on record, I'm telling you, Navika, that I'm proud of my chief minister, that at a time when migrant workers across the country were struggling, they were in a state of panic, they were on the verge of dying of hunger, my chief minister, Hemant Soren, he rose up to this occasion and he ensured that workers were given air tickets to fly back to Jharkhand. All necessary precautions were taken. This situation arose, Navika, because your government disowned them. This situation arose, Navika, because the government let them to die. This situation arose, Navika, because the government was not worried as to, these are daily wages. They do not have social security. In the city they're living in, they do not have ration cards. If the opposition had not risen to this occasion, Navika, a humanitarian crisis of the magnitude we cannot imagine could have been created. I would also like to respond to Mohandas Pai ji, Navika. He was talking of the vision of the, I would just like to remind Mohandas Pai ji, Navika, that he belonged to a company and he belonged to a sector that owes its existence, it owes its growth to the vision and the farsightedness of the various Congress leaderships of the past, Navika. To say what Congress has, today the Prime Minister took it very conveniently to abuse from
not to the people who ran them, not to the professionals who ran them, but only to the Congress leadership.
Let me finish.
All right.
You are saying why Rahul Gandhi was not there. Have you bothered to check how many times the Prime Minister has been in the Parliament? Can you for once share a database record of the attendance of Rahul Gandhi in the Parliament vis-a-vis the Prime Minister in the Parliament? You ask me if I can deny or if I can question any of the things that Prime Minister said. Can you for once keep your hand on your heart and deny a single thing that Rahul Gandhi made in his, in his speech?
Well, Mr. Mayur Shekhar Jha, I put a hand on my heart and I say, yes, he should have picked up the issue of inflation and unemployment.
He did.
And
he did.
Can I complete? Do I have your permission? Okay.
Yes,
but could he have come clean on the fact that the definition of poverty had been changed by his government to bring those 14 crore people out of poverty, which he took credit for? And may I also tell you with a hand on my heart that in Rajasthan there was a full rally that was planned to pick up the issue of price rise and inflation. And you know what Mr. Rahul Gandhi went and said there? He told the country the difference between Hindu and Hindutva. So may I just remind you, before you get all pious and moralistic on me and begin to question me,
you made a point, Navika,
may I remind you of that? But before you come in, Mohandas Pai wants to rebut to your taking his name, and then I get to Gaurav Bhatia to respond to your political charges.
I am not taking Mohandas Pai's name. I am taking name of this sector. Today, telecom sector, IT sector, these are sectors that are brainchild of the
Bhaiya, you have all the rights in the world, Mr. Mayurshekhar Jha, but some rights also are given to other people like Mohandas Pai, who are professionals.
Blinded Bhakt will say whatever he wants to. The fact that the sunrise sectors of this country are a giving of the Congress party of this country.
All right. Blinded Bhakt kisko kaha? Mujhe kaha. तो ठीक है, मुझे रोज कहते हैं. If I raise questions and I'm going to be called a blinded Bhakt, you know, kudos to you. But if you call Mohandas Pai a blinded Bhakt, I will leave the floor for him to respond to you. I don't speak on his behalf, and I don't allow others to speak on my behalf. Yes, Mohandas Pai, respond to Mayurshekhar Jha.
Navika, the first point is the Supreme Court of India has held in a court decision, I'm sure Iskandar can educate us, that is the primary responsibility of the state government to take care of the migrants, give them food and take care of them. And most of the state governments fail because they are the government on the ground. So the Maharashtra government, Delhi government should have done it and they failed. The matter went to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court decision. I'm sure Iskandar will tell you. Now, as far as the IT industry is concerned, let us understand first thing. By 1991, India was almost broke. Why was it? Because between 1950 and 1980, because of Nehru's bad policy of suppression of India's capital, India grew poorer than the rest of the world. We only grew at 3.5%. The world, we grew at 4.5%. It's only in the 80s we grew faster. 91, we opened up. We credit Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh for opening up and giving us back our economic liberty. And the industry grew because of their good policies. They deserve credit, not anybody before that. Then, when Vajpayee came, Prime Minister Vajpayee came, he had a 108-point program. That was a real zinger for taking off and creating the stage to create an industry which is $170 billion. All governments of this country from 1991 deserve credit for this industry. All of us acknowledge this. So I don't know what the gentleman is talking about. It is not due to Rajiv Gandhi or anybody.
Because Mohanji,
was the one
because Mohanji, you conveniently, now you are responding to what I said. Mohanji, now you are responding to what I said.
Nehru heard this country economically, data is there. Rajiv opened
up. No, now you are conveniently responding to what I said, Mohanji. Do you remember what you said in your opening remarks?
Don't shout, yaar. Please keep quiet.
No, because you don't remember what you said in your opening remark. You are
telling me what the leg up for India to grow. Let me, Bhaiya, keep quiet here. Please listen to data. Navika, in 1991, we were $275 billion. By 2020, we have gone to $2.93 trillion. Grew in rupees at 13% a year for 29 years and 8.6% a year. All the government from 91 deserve credit for keeping India open. Even though some went back, all of them deserve credit. Everybody acknowledges this. So what is the point?
Well, this is the issue, and Gaurav Bhatia, pardon my saying so, Mayurshekhar Jha, you've had your say. 1 minute. You know, the debate is not ending anytime soon, so you will get your second chance after everybody gets a chance to speak. So Mayurshekhar Jha, just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath. You can make your next point when I come to you again.
But I need to respond to what Mohandas ji said.
हाँ, आप सब चीज का बोलिएगा. You must say, and you have full.
No, I just want to thank him for acknowledging the fact that Congress governments of the past have worked, which he conveniently ignored in his opening remarks.
Well, yes, okay. All kudos to you. No kudos to the people who worked in that sector. No kudos to them. Only kudos to the Congress leaders. Take it. All right. Lock, stock and barrel. Lock, stock and barrel. The credit goes to the Congress party. But Gaurav Bhatia, I want to ask you because the Prime Minister made a statement, and the Prime Minister said, "Make in India, India mein nahi ho sakta." Who are the people who are the detractors of that policy? And he mentioned this, and today you've heard what Mayurshekhar Jha said. I want to ask you, is it this approach of the Congress, कि जो किया हमने किया, and nothing to the professionals? And they say, you know, a virus is there in this country over here? Who was creating wealth in this country in the period that the Congress was in power? And I want to know, should we in this country start condemning people, entrepreneurs who put in money, make businesses grow, give jobs to people? Should we start condemning them? Is that the solution to the unemployment problem that is so close to the heart of the Congress party? I want to ask you that, Gaurav Bhatia.
Thank you, Navika. So today when Narendra Modi ji spoke, you know, like any other Indian, I could think of a match that took place between India and Pakistan. The Rawalpindi Express, Shoaib Akhtar was rushing and he thought he is bowled a very good delivery. And then the Shatabdi Express of India, Sachin Tendulkar hit him for a 6. And even Shoaib Akhtar had to praise because he knew that he can't beat the best batsman in the world. The same way Narendra Modi ji, like a statesman today, highlighted what India stands for. And let me start with COVID itself, where the real emphasis was. Navika, COVID was a tough time for the country, but India was tougher collectively. And Narendra Modi ji, I think, clearly showed how the resolve of the government with the participation of the citizens was very firm. 170 crore vaccine doses have been administered. 80% of the second doses have been given. What does it show? It shows a very positive, constructive approach. Now compare this with the opposition's approach. That is why Narendra Modi ji cited the example of Maharashtra and Delhi, where the state government was duty bound to take care of these people who are also citizens of the country. But rather they were forced that please go back to your native state. And I think that itself shows the negativity in the opposition. The second thing which you were talking about, I think a very important message from the Prime Minister was regarding the participative democracy. For us, it is participation of 135 crore Indians to give strength to our country. For the Congress especially, it is about Gandhi Parivar, and that constitutes the entire democracy of the country. Why do I say that? This number is important. The number of startups till 2014 were only meager 500, and now last 7 years it has gone up to 60,000. From 500 to 60,000. Imagine, this is the power of the youth that has been channelized by our Prime Minister. Third point, which is very important, Narendra Modi ji emphasized on the fact that you are in opposition. That doesn't mean that you have to oppose everything. You have to become a destructive opposition. And they hate Modi ji so much that they are even willing to harm our country, our nation. And why do I say that? When China episode took place and China was given a befitting reply, the response of Rahul Gandhi was surrender Modi. When COVID problem came, they said it is Movid, it is Indian strain. And surgical strikes happened. The entire country celebrated, but the Congress party was asking for proof. So Narendra Modi ji made a very pertinent point that you are in the opposition. You may not like us as a government, but in times when the nation has to unite, the opposition has to play a very constructive role.
Absolutely, and I want to ask our young spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, Abbas Haider. Abbas Haider, of course, problem of poverty still exists in India. We are not blind to that. Of course, it exists. What do we need to do? What do governments need to do? Yes, we need to address that problem. Is there a problem of inflation? Yes, there is. There's no denying that. There's no running away from that. Is there a problem of unemployment? Of course there is. But is it the first time that these issues have come up? This is a process that has gone on from 1947 to 2022 and will continue. Look at the population of our country and look at the kind of diversity that exists in India. And there are problems. Look at the landmass of India. Look at the way we are a country which is cash-strapped, whether at the central level or at the state level. So there are problems at the center, there are problems at the state level, and we have not surmounted all our problems in the last 75 years of this country's freedom. Do these need to be addressed? Of course they do. But I want to ask you, will they be addressed with one opposition pointing fingers at the government pointing fingers at the opposition? And I want to ask you, on sensitive issues like COVID, should there have been a confrontation between the opposition and the center? Most people in India think that there should not have been a confrontation at that time. There should not have been questioning of the vaccination drive. Many people at that time said, oh, you're not bringing in vaccinations, you're not bringing in Pfizer, you're not bringing in the various other international vaccines. But the question is, the Prime Minister had faith in the Indian companies, waited a wee bit more than the others, maybe less than a month more than the others, and the vaccination drive began, and the rest, as they say, is history. I want to ask you, should we not all fight together a pandemic that visits the world once in 100 years? Even on the issue of COVID, should we as a country have been at loggerheads with each other? It's a question that even the opposition needs to do some soul searching on. Do you agree?
Well, as far as our Prime Minister is concerned, today I am highly disappointed as a citizen, because our Prime Minister, I think, who does not believe in the parliamentary convention and custom, was for raising question of the common people. When migrant workers were walking down from Maharashtra and Gujarat to Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, our respected Prime Minister was buying a plane for himself for more than 8,000 crores. This is how sensitive he was. And during the second wave of the COVID, he was constructing a palace for himself. This is what he was doing. I mean, let's not talk about political rhetoric. Let's talk about reality. And the reality is, in the past 7 years, 23 crore citizens have gone down from middle class to below poverty line. This is what our Prime Minister has done. When crude oil prices were $105 per barrel, petrol prices were 71 rupees. Now, when it's gone down to $65 per barrel, the petrol prices are 100 rupees. And even today, when they are like the crude oil price is $93 per barrel, the petrol price is 100 rupees. So this is what has been, Prime Minister has been doing in our country. So the people of the country are highly disappointed. They want answers on the questions of unemployment, on inflation. But Prime Minister believes in rhetoric. The Prime Minister, he just don't want to answer these questions. He just wants to,
Okay. Gaurav Bhatia, respond.
Navika, I wish to respond to it. Thank you. If there has to be one party which is the most selfish party in the country, it has to be Samajwadi Party. Because I will never forget, like any other citizen, after the Muzaffarnagar riots, the then Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav was busy dancing to the tunes of various Bollywood stars in Safai Mahotsav. But what is your role, Samajwadi Party? I wish to ask you. The vaccine that has protected every citizen, the Bharatiya Janata Party ensured the security to the citizen. What did you do? You called it BJP ka tika. 2 years Samajwadi Party leaders were not even out to help the citizens. You were hiding till the UP elections were announced. And Navika, let me make it very clear, the unemployment issue has come up twice. When Samajwadi Party was in power in Uttar Pradesh, the unemployment rate was 17%, which is down to 4.5% now. And Congress Party, the person who's representing, I wish to tell him that Rajasthan is witnessing an unemployment rate of 27.1%. So please, when you talk about unemployment, please introspect and look into your own misdeeds when you were looting respective states when in power. whether it is the Samajwadi Party or the Congress Party.
I want to...
Gaurav Bhatia was defending Samajwadi Party due to Muzaffarnagar riot. But as far as Samajwadi Party is concerned,
so are you still missing
in opposition,
is Akhilesh Yadav still missing me? You can't defend Samajwadi Party. Is this debate about Gaurav Bhatia? Or is this debate about Samajwadi Party calling vaccine BJP ka tika? Navika, they miss me so much. What do I do?
Well, let's not get personal, Mr. Abbas Haider. Let's not get personal. These issues can be settled between you and whoever you want outside of this debate. We are debating the problems of this country, and I'm sorry, I refuse to give space to any personal barbs on this show. And I want to get in Suman Siraman. Suman Siraman. Of course, the opposition should question the government, but shouldn't the opposition also be present in Parliament to listen to the answers?
You should put out the attendance record of the Honorable Prime Minister and the attendance record of Shri Rahul Gandhi. So that's the first point. So that people can see, for themselves what has been the attendance record. Now, the important point I want to make here is very simple. There are a few issues which today were completely far removed from reality that it actually concerned me. First, the opposition government spread COVID into the hinterland. The Indian Railways operated over 4,500 special trains to transport the workers back. The Honorable Supreme Court gave an order for it. The ministry, the railway ministry, claimed they had transported 60 lakh workers back to their hometowns. And to the best of my knowledge, the railways comes under the union government. Correct me if I'm wrong, unless Nehru is responsible for something on that issue.
Suman Siraman, I think you're forgetting a basic fact that the initial policy of the government was that everybody should stay where they are. That was the first policy. That is when the opposition began to encourage people ke nahi ghar jao. That is when the matter went to the Supreme Court. So please remember the chronology of events and decisions, Suman Siraman.
Okay, so people moved out only of opposition ruled states, and there was no migration of workers walking on the roads across BJP ruled states. Wow, that's my point.
Dr. Suman Siraman, I think you should be a member of the media, because the media gets blamed all the time for twisting comments. So you should join the media now and be an august member of this gathering, because you are twisting everything.
I'm not twisting anything at all. Thank you for acknowledging.
1 minute. Once this movement started, there was a no holds barred. There was fear mongering that was spread. I think you have a very short memory.
One second, Navika. Let me complete my point. This poverty.
Use facts. Please do not use falsehoods and twisted facts.
No. You said media is twisting facts. Thank you for that.
I said that's always the allegation. That's always the allegation. Tell me which politician hasn't leveled that allegation.
No, Navika, now come back to the topic.
No, but just when you get clean bold, you want to come back to the topic.
There is no clean bold.
That's how convenient.
Clean bold. I have only stated very clearly that people migrated from almost every other state where they needed to go back home, where migrant workers were in large numbers. It was not as if they said, opposition ruled states, let us all go back home, and migrant workers in BJP ruled states, let us all stay back. That is most ridiculous. Second point, poverty line. What did the UPA government do? After the Tendulkar committee report came, and after the poverty line suddenly dropped, lifting lakhs of crores of people out of poverty, the government said this is wrong. And they appointed the Rangarajan committee that gave a report which increased the poverty, number of people below the poverty line from 270 million to 363 million. Are you aware of that? And are you also aware that the same report said that the UPA government between 2009 and 2012 lifted 91.6 million people above the poverty line, and not the drop poverty line, but the raised poverty line of 47 rupees per day in urban areas and 32 rupees a day in rural areas. So please get facts right. And it is a problem because when these kind of statements are made on the floor of the House, then people simply do not see the whole picture. The entire issue of this poverty line is that
so Ishkaran Bhandari, for the last seven and a half years, the Congress has been putting out the right picture, but the BJP has been disproving their facts, and the people are not being able to see the facts as they are. That's the allegation now from Dr. Suman Siraman. Would you want to respond to that?
Yes, Navika ji, I've been patiently waiting for my time, so I hope nobody would interrupt me. You talk about picture by Congress. So what the Prime Minister has spoken, everybody has discussed. But immediately after he finished speaking, multiple Congress handles, official handles, have tweeted a picture of Mr. Manishankar Iyer without a quote. So what is Mr. Manishankar Iyer known for? I will just say 4 of the statements he is famous for, because that is what the Congress official handles have tweeted. A person on a day Congress party was called a party of a tukde leaders, they tweet the photo of a picture who went to Pakistan, to Pakistani audiences, said, Modi hatao, hame lao. How does Pakistan vote in Indian elections? What was the agenda behind saying that? I leave it to the discretion of your viewers. Then a person who said, please don't interrupt. Then a person who said that Narendra Modi 21वीं शताब्दी में कभी भी भारत का प्रधानमंत्री नहीं बन सकता, नहीं बन सकता, नहीं बन सकता, चाय का वितरण कर सकता है, हम जगह दे सकते हैं, वो पार्टी जो आज लीडर ऑफ ऑपोजिशन भी नहीं बन सकती है. Then he said, and he has compared very often Kashmir, what India is doing in Kashmir, with what the Israelis do in Palestine. Then he's a person who's said on camera, बहुत नीच आदमी था. So if this is the response of multiple Congress official handles, Pradesh committees, to what the Prime Minister said, then I can only say if the Prime Minister decides to respond to this tomorrow in Rajya Sabha, decides to quote some of the statements of Mr. Manishankar Iyer, then बहुत और जलील होना है, बहुत और जलील होना है.
But Gaurav Bhatia, respond to the poverty definition issue that has been raised by Dr. Suman Siraman. Respond to that, Gaurav Bhatia.
You know, Sumanji is a very dear friend, but he is suffering from selective amnesia. I remember during the UPA regime, Raj Babbar infamously said, 8 रुपए में तो पूरी थाली आ जाती है. That was the definition of poverty for them, कि 8 रुपए भी बहुत है दिन के. And I would very proudly say, like any other Indian, that during the worst pandemic that our country witnessed, 80 crore poor people and people who were looking towards the government for food and ration were supported by the government for almost 2 years. And Navika, I think the Prime Minister made a very pertinent point when he said that during epidemics and pandemics we see a lot of people actually die because of hunger. But India could combat that and ensure this food security for every citizen. Now coming to a very important point which I wish to make on your debate. That Rahul Gandhi, when he spoke, what he said was contemptuous. What he said showed the low level of understanding he has of the Constitution, because he said that Judiciary and Election Commission of India have become tools actually of destroying the voice of Union of States. I would like to give you 2 examples. The Supreme Court was the one that ensured that when Karnataka Assembly floor test had to be done, there was a midnight hearing and an order was passed in favor of the Congress party, and the date was, preponed, and it happened the very next day. Rahul Gandhi doesn't remember that Supreme Court verdict. Second, Election Commission of India, Ahmed Patel's election to the Rajya Sabha. There was, overturning of the returning officer's decision by the Election Commission of India. And Sonia Gandhi came out and she said, thank God there is Election Commission of India. So now Rahul Gandhi, how can he attack the constitutional
Sumansi Raman is
bodies
rebutting.
of our country?
Sumansi Raman is rebutting. Sumansi Raman, 30 seconds to you.
Gauravji, quite apart from the fact that you did not answer the question I had raised on the poverty line and the Rangarajan committee report, I also want to point out that there is now multiple reports which now say that 230 million Indians have been pushed below the poverty line in the last few years. Now, you can refute that if you would like, but the point is you are not putting out the data which even supports that even the 91 million people who were pulled out of the poverty line between 2009 and 12 has been achieved by you.
I told you about
230 million have gone
Indians
below.
getting free ration.
No, I'm not talking about the free ration given for 1 year.
Well, this calls for a debate because Dr. Sumansi Raman will continue to raise these questions. The government, the Prime Minister has answered questions on the floor of the House. There is always, after the reply, a right of the opposition to demand further clarifications and to move some amendments to the Prime Minister's speech. If some questions remained unanswered, then why did the opposition not raise those questions and those amendments? Well, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, that option was available. Why was it not utilized? Is that a question that still needs to be answered? We'll leave that answer for the Congress to give us. With that, thank you very much to my guests for joining me on debate number 1.